Heads up, it's the RollJays podcast, the voice of the Creighton basketball fan. With your hosts, Jimmie Allen, Alex Drake, and Casey Matthews. Join the crew and meet CU players, coaches, and a whole lot more. Now, the RollJays podcast. Here's Jimmie Allen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into the RollJays podcast, brought to you by Pixel Fire Marketing and Pyramid Contractors. Jimmie Allen, Alex Drake, Casey Matthews, joined by Creighton Point Guard Steven Ashworth today. Steve, obviously a big win for you guys against Georgetown. Got back on the right side of the win-loss track. What did it mean to get that win in Omaha this weekend?
Yeah, it was big. Obviously, going 2 games in a row without getting a win, and also having our bye week in between there. Felt like it had been a month since we'd won a basketball game, and that can start weighing on you as a player. But I thought that the team did a good job this week, just trying to prepare and get ready for Georgetown, knowing that they took it to us when we were out there in D.C., and it was a chance for us to kind of get some redemption and revenge, per se. And I thought that the guys did a great job, especially in that second half. I felt like, in a way, it was kind of a flip of what happened in D.C. to where we didn't finish the first half very well, didn't start the second half very well, and they did a great job owning that kind of middle part of the game in DC, where I felt like we did a better job of managing that portion of the game, which I think was the big difference in the game.
What was it that allowed you to do that? We talked a little bit about it at halftime, and one of our comments was just that the pace of play needed to be faster than it was in the first half. How did you guys flip that switch and get out and run there in the second half?
I think a lot of it was securing the defensive rebounds. There was a few that just were either getting tipped different ways, or some transition looks that they had that then they got second chances to where we couldn't really get out and run. And then I think that Jimmie and Kalk did a great job of slowing down Peavy later in that first half and then in that second half, which then allowed us to get more misses and out in transition and running. And you saw, probably the play of the game was Kalk's block on Peavy. Then next thing you know, he's running down and the alley-oop to finish it in transition. And those are the types of plays that I feel like if we can string a few of those just together within a sequence, that it really gets the offense going, gets the crowd into the game, and gets everything kind of moving on all cylinders.
Steve, can you talk about how just in general basketball is in itself a game of runs in every individual game, but also the season? Like, you guys went through a little lull early in the season, and then you have that fantastic 9-game run. What does that aspect of the season give you as far as confidence after just a little 2-game skid to restart it?
Yeah, it's big to just understand the whole perspective of basketball, of life, of everything, that there's going to be ebbs and flows. And that's why I think that as a program and just as, under Coach Mack's tutelage, there's just so much about being process-oriented rather than result-oriented. Because a lot of things, if you're changing your day-to-day based on wins and losses, if you go into the next day of practice and it's lighter because we won or it's harder because we lost, those things I think really take a mental toll on the team. And Coach Mack, Jeremy, everybody from top down has done an unbelievable job of just making sure that we stick to the process of what we believe in as a team. And I think that that only shows itself, or not only shows itself within a season, but also within the games, to where if we're confident in the shots that we're getting and they're good looks, they're good attempts, it's obviously a message of, hey, keep shooting them, keep being confident in that, and they'll fall. It's just one of those ebbs and flows. And then I think the other instance is it's hard to win on the road. And it's also really hard to beat a top 10 team in the country on the road. And understanding just what a game is really like as a part of the whole season, it's you look at that game and you can just look at it as dang, we lost, or you can look at it of, okay, what things did we learn about ourselves that can help us come March? Because that's really when I think you can get into the more nitpicky of one game, do or die, because it is do or die, as opposed to the season. You got to look at it as a whole. And I think that Coach Mack and Casey can attest to it, being within the program even longer than I have, and just what that means to a program.
we hear all the
Yeah.
time. It's tough to win on the road. We hear that all the time. In your eyes, can you sum that up? Why that is? I mean, is it the opposing crowd? Is it not sleeping in your own bed? Is it the travel schedule? Is it bits and pieces of all that? Why is it tough for you specifically in your mind?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's everything. You're in a different routine. At home, you have the same schedule every single game day. We know that 4.5 hours before tip off, we're going to be getting ready for shoot around, and we're going to watch our film, and it's going to be that process to where we're in a rhythm. Warm ups are the exact same time. There's no bus to the arena. All those things, as opposed to when you're on the road, could be different meals, could be different. Like, it's just a different scenery, and so it takes a mature group. And I think that you've seen that in this year's team, that we've been able to go on the road and be successful in conference, and win some games that teams probably don't normally win. I think looking back at it, we might be the only team to win at Villanova and some of these other places that are just hard places to win. And it takes a group that's committed and together as well, because you get also, like, you look at some of the plays that happen within a game, to where it's like a fast break dunk at home. If a team gets a steal and gets a fast break dunk, like Peavy had one of those in the first half, it's like nobody cheered, right? And it's like, but you're on the road, and that gets a crowd into the game. Everybody gets going, and then you start feeling like, okay, do they have the momentum or not? And I think at home, just some of those plays, even less so about like the great plays you're making, the fact that any great play they make isn't celebrated except for everybody on their bench, I think is a big deal in college basketball, just to the whole momentum of a basketball game.
I think you're right on the money there, Steve. You kind of, I was going to answer the question for Jimmy a little bit too, in that, we're so programmed. I don't mean basketball players. I mean people in general. We're so programmed to expect positive feedback when we do something positive. And when you're in a situation where you're on the road and you're playing well and you're not getting that positive feedback from the crowd because they want you to lose, it plays with your mind a little bit. But what happens is, when you have a mature team and a team that has been together, you give each other that positive feedback because you understand how important it is. And then you also can block out some of the, it's not negative feedback, but it's positive feedback for the opponent when they do inevitably make a play. It's hard to do that. It really is. I mean, I think you said it too, man. It's like, there's so many variables. You weren't here yet. I'll never forget, because you know how John McHugh is with travel, and everything's scheduled, right? And you've got to be on the bus by this time. And we get on the bus. We're playing at Seton Hall, and we're on the way to the arena, and we're kind of like, you kind of zone out in some ways, but John never does. Johnny's always on top of it.
Yeah.
He's looking. He's like, why is this guy going this way? And he's looking at his GPS. He's looking at the ETA, and he's like, this isn't right. So he stops the bus driver, and he's like, hey, like, where are you taking us? And look up the address. He's put in the complete wrong address from the GPS.
Oh, no.
And yeah, and we're like 10 plus minutes down the road going to the game. So, when that happens, everything, right? Jeremy's table work that time changes, right? So, yeah. And it's like, it takes a mature team to be able to say, like, okay, yeah, this messed us up, but it's okay, to go ahead and move on. So,
Alex, I don't want to cut you off, but Steven, I mean, obviously that's one of the road horror stories. I
wasn't talking.
Well, you're going to be next to ask. Steve, do you have a favorite horror story from the road like that, other than the situation? I don't think you were part of that situation that Casey said, but do you have something like that you could share and not be punished for?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll actually share something that happened at Utah State, because I feel like all of our road trips have gone smooth so far. I'll knock on some wood as I say that, but yeah, there was a time at Utah State where it's pretty typical to where you'll have like a shoe bag, and the managers do a great job taking care of the shoe bag. Well, at Utah State, the guys, after practice, it was a quick turnaround. We had practice, then we were catching the flight and we're heading out, and everybody needed to get their shoes in the shoe bag. Me personally, knowing that like things could happen to where a bag's forgotten or misplaced or didn't make it, like I always took my pair of shoes in my backpack, and I've always done that. And then if they're like, hey, we need a pair of shoes in the shoe bag, that's always been my extra. That's never been my game pair. It's only if something happened to my shoes in the game, like they ripped or needed to change it up. And so we get to shoot around because we didn't have – it was like a Saturday morning game. So we had Friday night practice in Logan, travel, and then so we get to shoot around Saturday before the game, and everybody's like, hey, where are the shoes at? And there was about 8 or 9 guys who didn't have shoes for the game. So we're in San Jose. We're hitting up Stanford. We're hitting up Cal. We're hitting up any Nike school because we had like a lot of them were our centers and forwards. So we had like you can't go to the local Foot Locker and get a pair of 17s. Like they're just not sitting on the rack. And so we actually were able to come up with enough pairs. Some of the managers ran to like 4 different Nike outlets and different stores in and around San Jose State University. And then I think Stanford hooked us up with like a pair of 17s for our center. And it was just like, it was one of those days. And so, but it was also one of those moments where we'd had these shoot arounds, man, that were like hour and a half long, it felt like. And we felt like we were going live. Like, and then you get to the game later that afternoon or that evening, you're just like kind of tired and fatigued from shoot around. So the only thing we could do was walk through and shoot free throws. And this then became our routine because the guys played great. Like everybody was in a rhythm and we made shots that game, and we went to coach and we're like, hey, we felt way fresher by not doing a full shoot around. Can we just do this from now on? And that's how it went.
There's so many moving parts. That's why like a lot of times I try to give shout outs to managers and and the other crew because there are so many moving parts that are going on. Like, you guys remember when it was Texas A&M where their jerseys got left and Buzz Williams came out and said that was my fault? Yeah, I didn't pack the bag. Like, listen, that's super cool for Buzz to do that. He obviously has nothing to do with the jerseys,
right?
And so, for him to take the bullet for the managers was really cool. But it's incredible how much behind the scenes stuff is really happening.
Steven, just for your knowledge, Casey's never given the managers any props on this show. That was a blow.
That's not true. That's not true.
He just made that up.
That's not even close to true. I was a manager myself, so I'm always giving shout outs, man.
I know Casey too well, Jimmy. I know he's about the people. So
when he finally does do that, I'll make sure to let you know.
All righty.
Hey, haters.
Steven, now you're making me think of horrible travel stories. But is there a guy during that nine game run and then carried into the last 3 games that you think is flying under the radar that has really surprised you with things that they're doing on the court to make things easier for the team?
That's a good question. I think in general, the secondary group, I think, did a really good job of elevating their game and just being prepared. We got, the stats being shared at the screen right now, so I could and see.
Alex, but horrible road stories. I was throwing his career stats up from ESPN's website. Sorry.
But yeah, I think that whole second group has done a really good job coming in, and I'd give a shout out to Isaac Trout specifically. Not only is he shooting the ball with confidence, but he's also guarding really, really well. I think early on in the season, even last year, there were some different defensive coverages where there was worried of, okay, if Isaac gets switched onto this guard, is it going to be a situation where we're then immediately in a rotation? Similar to when it's like if I get posted up by, a forward or a big, like we're going to have to react because you don't want your 6-foot point guard on the 7-footer. Like, and so some of those things, just defensively, he's taken accountability and has improved his footwork, his anticipation, and just his defensive toughness overall. That has, I think, allowed him to play even more confident offensively, knowing that he's doing those little things defensively and doesn't have to worry about it or even think about it anymore. It's become second nature. And then, I always love just like freshmen in general and the naiveness to what they have and the confidence and swagger. And I think that Jackson and Ty have done a really good job of just, taking the season as it comes and rolling with the punches. Some nights are better than others, but those guys in the locker room, at practice, on the road, like, are always just such a joy to be around. And I think that goes a long way to where you're at mentally off the court, to just the importance of what that can do to your performance on the court as well. So those are probably three of the guys that, stand out in my mind just off the top of my head.
Obviously, I was sitting there watching you guys in shoot around the other night when we were talking, and I was specifically watching Ty, and his shot looks more smooth, and he looks a little bit more comfortable. Now, that shoot arounds, it's not a game, obviously, two completely different things, but what have you seen from him growth-wise that obviously we talked to you about it, you've taken him under your wing a little bit, he's the guy behind you on the bench. Just from a growth standpoint, what have you seen out of him that you've been impressed by?
Yeah, Ty's a guy that always wants to work. He's not afraid of it. He's not shy of it. He understands that there's a fifth-year point guard in front of him right now, and that the opportunities for him in the game are going to be, hit and miss some nights depending on what the situation is. But he's always ready, and he's always excited for the games. I think that sometimes young freshmen can kind of get in that lull of, I might not play, and they don't necessarily bring that energy. But Ty does a really good job of that, and every day, whether it's a game day or not, he's in the gym with Mitch, getting up shots, and we all know how great of a shooter Mitch and how great of a coach Mitch is, and he's done a really good job working on that jumper with Ty, because I would agree with you. It's looking better. It's more smooth, getting it into a pocket that's a little bit more consistent, and just getting those repetitions.
Steven, I know your freshman year was 15 years ago,
Yeah.
so it's probably hard for you to think back that long ago. But it's common knowledge with freshmen. This is typically the time of year where you do have a little bit of a almost regression in some ways. As we watch Jackson, he's not shooting the ball particularly well, not to his standard, not to where he wants to shoot it at. But the really good players kind of turn the corner here coming in, this time of year as you go into March, as you go into postseason play. So for him, what are you looking for from him specifically, and how did you handle that your freshman year, about to go into postseason play? You want to contribute. Do you expect him to start hitting more shots? Like, what are you seeing from him that leads you to believe that he can contribute more as we move forward?
Yeah, I think that Jackson's one of those guys that every time you shoot it, no matter where he's at, you think it's going in. So I think from that standpoint, as I have confidence in him, a lot of it is just regurgitating that to him of how confident he should be in himself. And I think that goes a long way. I remember my freshman year, like, you don't really think about it, but as a freshman, you're just not on the scouting report, like, quite frankly, at all. And I remember my freshman year, early on in the season, I had a few nights where guys were leaving me open from behind the arc, and it was like, okay, if you're going to leave me open, I'm going to make you pay, just because you haven't proven that you can necessarily do it at the college level. And so there's that scouting report where you're really focused on the top 2-3 guys. A lot of times those freshmen come in, and it's like, I remember early on in the season having 15, 17, 20-point games, and then all of a sudden I'm on the scouting report, and it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Because a lot of those things also happen within the offense opportunistically. And as a freshman, you're not getting a lot of plays in the huddle or in timeouts called for you. And so early on in the season, you can get more open looks, more easy looks. And so part of that is on, me making sure that we can still get Jackson great shots, great looks, great opportunities within the flow of the offense. And a lot of that, I think he's also figuring out more and more with how big of a rim threat Kalk is and Jemiah is in transition. With both of them putting pressure on the rim, if he can get to those corners, he's going to get open looks and he's going to get open shots, and it's just going to come down to him knocking those down. And so I think that's where you're going to see more of his shots come from as the season progresses and as we get into March. And then, a few plays here and there that we call for him because he is such an elite shooter and scorer in those ways. So it's difficult as a freshman because you want the moment, you're ready for it, you feel like you got it, and he's one of those kids that has that confidence. And so I'm confident in him as well.
Let me ask you this, do you think it's harder for him in some ways because he's playing so many more minutes than most freshmen play in that role? Like, I just kind of thinking through this as you're answering. I mean, you were in that same position, playing a lot of minutes. Like, you don't get that time you don't get that time to sit and watch.
Stephen, before you answer that, I think we opened up some questions to our fans. And I think that goes perfectly into the first one from Greg, because he asked, we always hear about Creighton's offensive system and how difficult it is to learn. What was Stephen's biggest hurdle to overcome when learning this complex system, and why is it so difficult? And I think that kind of goes into the question about Jackson as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it can be like, imagine starting a new job and there's no rules and you just have the ultimate freedom. And it's like, hey, we need to get this task done. You need to involve these 5 people, but figure out how you want to do it. And then some of the other guys might have one idea of what's going to work, and some guys might have another idea. And then you're also you can't talk though. Like, you can't talk in the moment while completing the task. So it's like you're in the offensive end of the floor, and there is some communication, but it's not like you can say, hey, you go here, you go there, we're going to get into this action. A lot of it is like a telepathy type of thing. From across the court, you're seeing, okay, Ryan's going into that action, I'm going to space here. Or because they're going into that action, I'm going to back cut here. And it's just like figuring out that timing of when to move, when to be still. And then also, right, like last year, coming into a situation where I was the primary ball handler at Utah State, my usage was super high, to now coming to a situation where we had great guards around me with Baylor and Trey, as well as one of the most dominant centers in college basketball. Just figuring out like where does my skill set really fit in, and where should I be assertive, and where do I also need to pass the torch and let those guys make some plays for us that only they can make. And I think that throughout last season, I figured that out a little more. And then also coming into this offseason, just spending hours and hours within the offense, but then also in the gym, working on my craft and working on my conditioning so that I could play with the freedom and how much movement I move now. It seems like a lot of possessions you watch and it's like, wow, he never stopped. But at the same time, they're all calculated movements. It's not just running with your head cut off. It's understanding where your teammates are and what actions are going to, like, it's like a domino effect in a way as well. If I go into this action, this is going to trigger a back cut to then a cross screen to then a pin down. Like, all of those things play into it. And I think that it's a development. And then sometimes you hear from a coach, hey, get to the corner. Sometimes you hear on this one, you should have set a drag screen in transition, or you should have cut there, or you should have stayed there. And so it's just figuring that out, and it can be difficult at times, but time is the biggest thing, I'd say.
Steven, I don't want to bring up bad or scary memories, but Casey brought this up both after the St. John's game and then last week when we talked to John Fanta. Ryan Kalkbrenner goes down, goes to the locker room. First off, what's going through your mind there? But two, Casey's pointed it out. You did a great job of getting the guys together and gaining control back in that situation to keep you guys in the game. What are you saying to the guys in that moment?
Yeah, a lot of it was the first answer to your question of how did I feel was crap. Don't love to see a National Player of the Year candidate and our best player on the floor holding his foot and not being able to move it. And like I saw the play but didn't see it all, so I didn't know if it was like an ankle, but then he was holding his foot instead of his ankle. So then I was like, oh, I don't like that because of how big Ryan is, like, and how fragile feet are. So obviously thank the Lord that he was able to come back out of that locker room. But him going into the locker room was one of those moments briefly where I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. But then also understanding, right, like we're in a war and we're in battle. And so I think more naturally than I would otherwise if I was just watching the game and recognizing that's my teammate, one of my best friends, and understanding that, if he's seriously injured, just the implications that can have on our season and his career personally, I think weighed on me a little bit more after the game, but thankfully he was all right. But I think I was able to just kind of flip that switch of saying, hey, we're still competing for a Big East championship here. This is for first place in the Big East. And looking at Fred and saying, hey, you've put in hours, you're ready for this moment, be aggressive, let's do this thing. And also then recognizing how they're guarding pick and roll and trying to tell Fred briefly, hey, this is what we're going to have, this is what we can see. And then reminding the guys that how great they are as individual players and just trying to instill confidence into them. And I think that's what kept us in that that game with those few minutes that Ryan was out.
Your relationship with Ryan's well documented. You guys are all over social media doing stuff together. But anybody that's seen you guys in shoot around sees how your relationship with Fred just kind of, it's different. It's not, obviously you guys joke around a ton. It seems like you guys have a really great chemistry. Can you talk about that friendship and how much that's awesome over the last 2 years?
Yeah, Fred's definitely one of my best friends on the team. And I think that it's just Fred's a very sincere person. When Fred's talking to you, when you're around Fred, I feel like you have Fred's attention. And that's one of those moments where you can just bond and talk about anything. And then also the humility that Fred has coming from where he comes from, and the gratitude for everything that he gets to do here in America and playing at Creighton, and just the opportunity. And I think that this offseason when he decided to go into the portal was one of the saddest days of my career, knowing that Fred might not be coming back. And then I remember calling Fred, texting him, wishing him the best. And then when he decided that he was going to come back, and just talking to him about, what went into it, what was the decision, and him talking about how he recognized that, like, all of his friends were here. And, that's what's really important. You could go play basketball anywhere, but also if you get a chance to do it with your friends, how good is that? And so I think that that's one of the things that just anybody who's around Fred is going to be drawn to him naturally. And that's one of the things that I think has drawn us together.
That brings up a really interesting question too, because we all when we talk about the portal, we talk about the individual that's leaving, and with the words tampering and all that's being thrown around, like, we don't think about the guys that are on the team, the communication that goes out to them. When you hear one of your guys enters the portal, do you feel any type of, I don't know, like, allegiance to the team to try to talk him into coming back, or is that like a relationship based thing?
I would definitely say it's more of a relationship based thing. I think that in some ways, if the college landscape becomes more transactional and just contracts, that might go away a little bit.
Right.
But at the same time, when you're around these guys 24/7 like we are, you want what's best for the team in the season, and I think everybody can lock in on that. But there's also a landscape and an understanding that we also have to want what's best for our teammates once that season's over. And I think that in a lot of ways, when you've built this friendship with those guys and this brotherhood, you can look at a situation and say, okay, I saw why that was better, for him to go somewhere else. And you can see it. And sometimes you don't think it's better. And that's where, in that relationship, you might reach out and say, hey, I know you maybe finished the season not the way that you wanted to, but there's still a lot of great things here for you. And I think that you can really excel in this, and, make sure you're doing what's best for you, but don't lose sight of what this could be, type of thing. So definitely situational.
That's a good answer, Steven. And I think too, you have a good perspective on that because you did transfer. And so it allows you some insight and to know it's not just a money thing. It's not just a Minnesota style play. There's more to it within those decisions. So that's pretty insightful. As we look forward, we do our radio show after the games, and can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but he called in and I think rightfully so, was questioning offensively the turnovers and how it was hurting us. And I talked a little bit about how I felt like you have a history of reducing those turnovers as each game becomes of more and more importance, especially in tournament style where it's a single elimination. And then the other night, I felt like you kind of took a step and, and less turnovers than in the previous, I think, 4 or 5 games. Can you talk about your mentality as the point guard? And you and I have talked about this privately on how you have to think as a point guard in this offense. But when you go into a tournament style, what changes for you in the sense of ball security and the chances that you're willing to take?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's valid. And it's also something that I've looked at, and you can look at just the box score and see a number, but then you also need to watch the film and see how that either turnover went or how that missed shot went. And so I think that in some instances, the fear of our turnovers in a lot of ways is just looking at a number, as opposed to how did the turnover maybe happen or what are you looking at? And so, like, for me as a point guard, a lot of what makes me great is the fearlessness that I have while playing and the confidence I have in my ability to make the play. Now, sometimes I try to make the play and I just don't execute it in the right way. And that either ends up in a missed shot or a turnover. And so I think for me, a lot of it is like recognizing, watching the game film back. Mitch and I just did an exercise the other day with this of like, we watched every single turnover I've had in conference, and we watched every single 3-pointer I've shot in conference. And we just graded them, and we said, okay, why did this happen? What did it look like? Because in some instances, the turnovers could be completely on one person, or in some instances, it's on 2 or 3 people. Whether it was like, hey, this was the play, this was the read, you got to set up the cut, those types of things. And so when it comes down to like a really tight game or a tournament style game, I think that just the understanding of how valuable each possession is, and then also the reward or consequence, like just valuing that. Because you look at it, it's like, okay, if I can hit Jason Green in transition and he dunks it, is that also not just 2 points, but also momentum? And is Jason Green feeling really good that he's on the board and that he's, getting involved in the offense early in the game? And if I miss that pass, is that pass then going to be a dead ball turnover or a live ball turnover? Like, are they going to be able to bring it back to us in transition, or is it going to be one of those that if I can get it up and over, it's a layup, or I might miss it a little long and it can just be coming the other way? Or some of the things to where it's like Kalk hasn't gotten a touch in a while. Do I try to force one up and over so that he can get a touch and he can see the ball go through the rim? Or is Jemiah out in transition and he's elite in that? Can I try to thread the needle so that he can go make a play, or do I just pull it back? Because some of the things as well is like, you never know what that possession was going to be like if you didn't have the turnover either. It could have ended up being a turnover from a different play or a missed shot in a different way. And so I think that some of it is definitely like making sure that you're prioritizing getting a shot, because when we get a shot, we've seen how elite our offense can be. But at the same time, not playing scared of consequences, because then we can't be our best version of ourselves either.
Steven, I want to break down just a little piece that you said in there. You mentioned, as you're going through it, especially on film and stuff, something like Ryan Kalkbrenner hasn't had a touch in a while, and do I try and force him one, or do we keep doing X, Y, Z, whatever it may be in that instance? But how hard is it for you as a point guard to manage that and make sure you are finding ways to get everybody involved so everybody can be successful, which in turn just helps everybody as well?
Yeah, there's definitely a responsibility and some weight on the shoulders when it comes to that. And it's something that is a privilege, honestly. I was talking with, the coaches just the other night about how it can feel at times like it's a lot, and you're coming to the end of the season, and sometimes it can be a grind with just how much is on our plates with, I think with NIL, we also kind of forget that we are students as well. And it's like, I have breakfast at 9 and then workout right after that. And then, practice right after that. And then, and on top of that, we got to finish our homework and then watch film and get all the prep done. And then, we might have some team events as well throughout the week. So like, there is a lot that goes on, but at the same time, you just got to be grateful in it. And I think that that's one of the things that I look at my role on this team, and just the opportunity to be an energy giver and a provider of opportunities for other guys within the offense. And it's like, that's what every kid dreams of. So you can look at it in a way that, okay, that's a lot for Steven to handle. Or you can look at it, it's like, wow, like it's pretty cool that Steven's gotten to a place in his career where he can manage that and has the opportunity to have that role. And so it's fun. And I think that I take pride when other guys are having really successful nights, even if I'm not having the best night myself. And I think that's something that's cool about basketball, is that when a team's really connected, guys are finding joy in the success of others. And I think this team is doing a really good job of it coming down the stretch.
Speaking of NIL, you can donate to Creighton's NIL Collective, the Bird Club, by scanning the QR code in the top right corner. All of your proceeds will go to benefit Creighton student-athletes as well as this podcast, so we would appreciate it. Steve, we were catching up with Creighton assistant coach Jeff Vanderloo on the radio show the other night, and I asked him how important the week off was, and he sighed the deepest sigh I've ever heard Lou give out. It just said how pivotal it was. Why was it a big week for you specifically to get that time off?
I think for me, I wish that we would have had this weather last week is the only thing that I would have changed about that. that bye week. But just a little mental reset, getting away from the game for a day or two before getting back into practice and working on ourselves of the things that we've learned from the last 11 games, and also, what did we learn from those losses of the final two, and how do we then also turn it around and get prepared for a Georgetown team coming into our building. And so it was a great week. It was needed, and I also think we were able to have some reflection where I think that throughout the season there's just go, and not a lot of time to sit back and be like, okay, where are we at? What else do we want to change before we're trying to accomplish these things? And it's like taking a cross country plane trip where you think about like just 1 degree difference from LA to New York, you could end up in Florida or New York City. Like,
Right.
it's that big of a thing. And I think that throughout the season, you can at times lose sight of, okay, do we have our heading straight and we're going the right direction? And I think that week was a good week for that for us.
How about as you look at this season, but also your career? You're coming down the stretch here where I know for the fans, myself included, I'm going to hate to watch next year without you guys on the court, but it's a part of the deal. How do you look at that, man? You got a couple regular season games left, and then it's win or go home. How are you preparing?
Yeah, it's something that I don't think you can ever truly prepare for, because you're just never ready for it to end. And especially like the level at which we play at, like in front of 18,000 fans, one of the best fan bases in the country. And so I think that a lot of it for me is like, rather than reflecting on, what I should be prepared for coming up, it's a lot of just enjoying the moments that I get, like on a regular game day, trying to take as many pictures as I can with all the fans that come early to support us. Like, because how often do you get to be somebody that other people really care about, if we're being honest, right? Like, not everybody gets to be somebody like that. And so, in the humblest way possible, just trying to appreciate that for what it is, and, high five as many kids and sign as many jerseys, and do all of those things that sometimes throughout your career you might think like, I don't want to do this, but there's going to be a time where you're never asked again for an autograph. So it's like,
Sure.
Just enjoy those things. And that's what I'm trying to do to prepare for just, the 4 final season, regular season games that we've got.
Steven, I want you to think back over the course of your entire career as a basketball player, whether it's grade school, high school, whatever. I want you to think about some of your hardest times, and what advice would 5th-year senior Steven Ashworth give himself, who's also now a father and a husband? What kind of advice would you give yourself and to any young player listening now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there's definitely been some hard years, some years where I thought I expected for myself and from just the team like one thing and got a completely different result, or wasn't really having the role that maybe I would have wanted. But one of the biggest hurdles that I'd had, or trials in my basketball career, is I broke my right wrist right as the offseason started, going into my junior year at Utah State. And that was a big year for me, trying to earn kind of that starter role and more minutes at Utah State. And then realizing I was going to need surgery on my shooting wrist that was going to put me 6 to 8 weeks out, and then treatment and recovery after that. And so, like, there was a lot of it to where I think the overarching theme is that if you put God first, things are going to be all right. And, I think about where my life is at right now. And if I had a wish when I was in 9th grade, I don't think I could have wished for what I have now. Like, I don't think I could have imagined the gratitude and the joy that I feel being a part of Creighton program, living in Omaha, having my son Tommy and my wife Peyton by my side, and just the joy that they bring. Like, I don't think I could have wished for anything better. And so, in a lot of ways, your imagination is great, but at the same time, just enjoy what you have, because there's so much to be grateful for. And if you can be grateful, in all things instead of for all things, it's much more of a holistic approach as opposed to kind of like an itemized thing of grateful for this or for that. Like, just be grateful in it all, because there's so much good that comes from it, and as you're grateful, you're going to be able to get through anything in your sports career and in your life.
You mentioned the weather and the aspect of doing things in the season. We're 2 weeks and 1 day away from the start of the Big East tournament. And obviously that involves a trip and going back to New York. When you're in that moment, do you have time to think about anything other than basketball?
Yeah, like those trips, and just this time of year, it gets all consuming, because and in some ways I do it to myself, because I think my favorite pastime is just watching hoops. Like, even if it's not our reruns or just like other West Coast later games, that's kind of how I wind down at nights. And I just love watching basketball, and so in a lot of ways it's at the forefront of your mind. But at the same time, I think that those trips, like Madison Square Garden, New York, Big East, I think that it's important to also just keep the perspective of, like, how cool is this? Like, how many people get to experience this? And then it's also helpful. I'm blessed enough that my family's going to be able to come out and join us, and so try to enjoy New York City with them and just all that has to offer, because those are memories and moments that we'll cherish forever. And hopefully it comes with a lot of wins, but if it doesn't, there's still bigger things beyond basketball.
We'll make sure we get you Alex's highlight tape from Peru State for you to break down next time you're on. Then
we also got to hope, Steven, that you get the shower, right? I mean, you got the shower last trip, you got the Mojave Ghost going in the hotel.
Yep.
Like,
yeah,
go.
I might bring one of, like, I might buy one of those travel size, like, bottles, just to then, like, because I mean,
I know
like,
I know a guy who did it. I'll get you his name and number, but
okay,
Mojave Ghost is special.
It is.
Steven, we appreciate your time. We'll catch up with you next week. Good luck throughout the week. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you. Go Jays.
Great Point Guard Steven Ashworth joining myself, Jimmie Allen, Casey Matthews, and Alex Drake right here on the RollJays podcast, brought to you by Pixel Fire Marketing and Pyramid Contractors. We'll catch up with you next week. We'll see you at 1620 The Zone on Wednesday following the game. Talk to you then.